Attention! Welcome to Manly Monday Live! Oh my goodness, here we are on another Monday night. And guys, it is amazing to see you guys tonight. I am so excited about tonight's show. In a world where there's constant flows of information, some good, some bad, critical thinking is more important than ever. The essential life skill is not being taught effectively, if at all, anymore. We're bombarded with facts and stories, with information at a higher rate than has ever happened in the history of the world, guys. It is monumental. This is a never, ever happened in history time period. It's so important for men and really any people to employ critical thinking skills to life. We're at a point where you must evaluate all the information before you give it, that you're being given at all times, guys, from all sources, just to be safe. And I would expect you to treat the information you get on my channel exactly the same way. Guys, welcome to Manly Monday Night Live. And I am so excited to have you guys here tonight. I look forward to this all week long. If you caught my Instagram post, I do get a little anxious still. I gotta admit, as much as I love hanging out with you guys, I still get a little uncomfortable before going live on the camera, guys, because it just feels incredible. I've actually spoken in front of 1,000+ people, guys. And honestly, this makes me more nervous. I used to be nervous about doing my podcast, but I really am comfortable with that anymore. But being live with you guys, it's just such an incredible experience to get feedback and to interact with you in real time. I enjoy it so much. So guys, wherever you are joining us from tonight, I want you to be sure and shout out, tell us you're here in the comments, announce yourself. And if you're on Facebook and joining us and you want these lovely little icons to show up that show you who we are so we can actually see your badge, it's entirely up to you. You don't have to. But if you want to see me visible, you can go to StreamYard.com/Facebook. And that just lets Facebook know that it's okay with you that StreamYard shares that icon that you share on your Facebook profile. If not, you know what? If you're just a letter and that's what you're comfortable with, that's absolutely okay, guys. I don't mind either way. But if you want to get personal with us and join the community and being we'll see how well I do tonight. If you want to get up close and personal with us, guys, and be a member of the community and be recognized for who you are, we love that community sense, guys. So that makes us very excited. So you can do that if you're with us on Facebook. If you're on YouTube, it shows by default. Guys, if you have questions for the live Q&A that happens in the second half of the show, if we have questions and only when we have questions, be sure and put a QQ in the chat in front of your question. That helps me and my wife, who's engineering this in the background, to see your question so we make sure and get a chance to address that question, because I want to answer your questions if you have them. Hi, Shirley. Great to have you. I see you're on the road tonight and you are not alone. I know Jessie is on the road tonight and listening in her car as well. So please be safe. I love having you guys here, but be safe while you're driving. Please don't put yourself in any unnecessary risk. If you want to join us on air, right, live during the Q&A, I have that available as well. There are, my English stinks tonight, guys, apparently. There is a link in the description of the video, wherever you're watching it, on Facebook or YouTube, that allows you to fill out a form on Google Docs that sends me notifications, so that way I can send you a link to join us during the Q&A if you would like to come on live on air. We don't have it happen very often, but you guys are the heart and soul of why I do the Fallible Man and why I do Manly Monday Live. So if you want to join us to ask your question live, that is an option. Now, guys, tonight on Manly Monday Live with the Fallible Man, we're talking about what critical thinking entails, why you should be using those skills, and we're going to do a quick crash course in case that was something that you were never taught. So let's get into it. Now, some of you may have had a course in critical thinking, or it was covered in a class you took, or some of you may have never been taught this really important skill. That's very possible. You may not even be sure what I'm talking about when I specifically ask about critical thinking. We've hit this incredible age where anyone can say anything or maybe censored for anything they say. But even the censors have their own agenda, it seems. I'm not getting political, guys. I'm not ranting and raving about that. I did a nice political piece about why men should get involved in politics last week with Gene Valentino on the podcast. So go check that out if you are into politics and want to dig into that. But that's not what we're about tonight. So how do you know what to believe? No matter what you believe, Sarah, let's get that background music just down just a hair for me. Thanks, hon. So how do you know what to believe? Who's telling you the truth? Who can you trust? And as you all know, I'm big into personal responsibility, and that applies to this part of your life as well. Your brain, thank you, is a magnificent thing. It is the most impressive computer in the world, and it's important to exercise this skill. So tonight we're going to go through quickly how critical thinking works and what it is. And I've added a couple steps to the generally accepted formula because I think it's incomplete. Now, hey, shout out in the comment section. I'm curious, just because my curious nature is getting the best of me. How many of you actually were ever taught critical thinking at some point in your life? That might have been a class on it. That might have been a class that talked about critical thinking. Tell us in the comments if you've ever actually been taught the valuable skill of critical thinking at some point in your life. Now, I know what you're all saying. You know, we think all the time, Britton. You're right, you do. But there is actually a way critical thinking takes place that's very close to the scientific method, but it's not quite the same thing. Now, you might ask why we're covering critical thinking, because what does that have to do with men, manliness, masculinity, being a husband, being a father, being a good man? What does that have to do, Brent? Why are we talking about critical thinking? Because applying the habit of critical thinking will help you in absolutely every facet of your life. Now, I'm going to go through the actual nuts and bolts of how critical thinking works pretty quickly because I don't want to bore you. I don't just like to do lectures. You guys are pretty smart anyways, and you can always go back and catch the replay if you need to slow anything down or if you missed part of it or I went through it too fast. And also be sure and put those questions in the chat section with a QQ, and I will address those, I promise. I try to address any questions I had. I actually had someone trolling us one night and asked a question, and I told them, like, hey, I'll catch that in the second half of the show. And they're like, no, dude, I was just giving you a bad time. I wasn't. So really, I will pretty much handle any question that comes my way. And if you've done our Q&As, you know anything man, husband, father, it has to do in the realm of manliness, we will actually address it. It doesn't have to be about critical thinking. Big breath. So now I actually did a PowerPoint for you guys, and I see Katie is joining us. Hey, Katie, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. And we got some other people online that aren't in the chat yet. That's fine, guys. I understand some of you are on the move, and I am grateful that you're joining us wherever you are. So thank you for that. Katie says she thinks she was taught critical thinking in school. You know, I think it was glazed over maybe in one of my classes, but I don't know if we ever actually spent any time on critical thinking, at least in my memory. So share with us if you think you were taught that, or if you weren't. I'd love to hear about it. But we're going to go through this. Now, I made a slide deck for you guys. So you don't have to look at my ugly face. You can look at my slide deck because, hey, it's there. I'm going to pull Sarah out of here. Okay. So we're going to talk about critical thinking tonight, guys, and I'll keep it bigger so you can read it because there is stuff to read on the slides, but I will be going over most of it. So if you're struggling to read the slide on whatever device you're watching, that's okay. I'm going to cover what's actually on the slide. So it's okay. You're not missing anything if you're struggling to read it. We will get you taken care of. There we go. Now, guys, critical thinking. Slide one. Why? Oh, I'm in my slides. Just a second. Somehow I jumped through all my slides. This is what happens when I go through them before the show. All right, guys. Critical thinking is what the conversation is about tonight. And be sure and join us in the chat section. I love having you guys here as part of it and being involved. It makes the conversation so much better. And I just love seeing your pretty faces and names in the chat section. Know you're hanging out with us tonight. Critical thinking. These are the steps of critical thinking as commonly identified. There is actually a basis of commonly accepted. This is what critical thinking is. So the steps of critical thinking are identification, research, evaluate, identify bias and assumptions, relevance, and inference. Now, those are all great big words, and I'm going to break it down a little bit more. I'm not going to leave it hanging at that, guys. I promise you. So step one is identify the problem or the question. Be as precise as possible. The narrower the issue, the easier it is to find solutions and or answers. So you have to identify what you're trying to deal with, right? And this can be applied to any situation, whether you want to be a better person, whether you want to learn a new skill, whether you want to solve a specific problem going on in your life. Critical thinking can be applied to every facet of your life. You want to be better on a bench press. Critical thinking applies. You want to be a better driver. Critical thinking applies. You want to get a promotion at work. Critical thinking applies. Critical thinking can be applied to every facet of your life. So the first step is we have to identify the problem or the question that we are trying to solve and be very precise about it to make sure we arrive at a great solution. Number two is you need to gather data, opinions, and arguments. Try to find several sources that present different ideas and points of view. This is where a lot of people get trapped in this day and age, and it really frustrates me. We are really bad in the current age of spending time in echo chambers. My favorite independent journalist, I actually started listening to him because he totally was on the opposite side of the aisle that I was on most things political. It's actually why I started listening to his channel. He has converted himself into a different way of thinking because he has identified things that he had problems with his thought process, not anything anybody I did, or, he doesn't know who I am. But I actually started watching him specifically because he had a different point of view than what I commonly had. And I can't grow or learn, and I can't understand how other people think if I spend all my time in a sounding chamber. So find several sources of data that present differing views and ideas and points of view. I actually had someone compliment me the other day. I was really blown away. They said, I'm really impressed on the podcast how often you will humor and talk to people with differing points of view, even when it's obvious they have a different point of view than you, but you still have a very respectful, polite conversation with them. And, it's always a good conversation. And I took that as highly complimentary, because that's one of the things I'm trying to do on the podcast is present a lot of different ideas, because there's not necessarily Brent has the perfect solution. I am willing to admit that I am not perfect. I'm willing to admit I'm on a journey. That's what the Fallible Man is about. And so I try and take in as much information as possible, and I apply critical thinking to a lot of my decisions. So guys, gather data, opinions, arrangements, and other things, and don't spend all your time in the echo chambers. Unfortunately, that is what a lot of things become. A lot of Facebook groups are echo chambers. A lot of YouTube channels become echo chambers, right? Instagram, any social media, even the news channels we pick often become echo chambers of our own personal biases on things. And you have to get as much information as possible. I told my clients all the time, well, I'm not training anybody right now, but I've told my clients in the past, I didn't read one article on bench press. I didn't want to read one book on, I've literally read thousands of articles on proper bench press technique. Now that may seem bored to you guys because maybe you're not a big gym guy like I am, but I did that because I wanted to compile all the good information. And then I compared all those thousands of articles and took the stuff that was consistent across all of them, regardless of their points of view, consistent, solid, sound, right? And that's what you have to do. Katie says reliable information is important. Yes, it is. So you have to gather all that data carefully. We're going to dig into actually scrutinizing that some in a second. Sarah says, I learned common sense mostly, but I did learn a bit about critical thinking in science. Jess says that high school math and science had some critical thinking being taught in them. So, okay, it is being taught to some extent, just as not a primary subject. That's good to see that at least we're still actually teaching this to some extent. Now, guys, number 3 in critical thinking is analyze and evaluate the data. Are the sources reliable? Because when you're in that first phase, you're not necessarily sorting out the good stuff from the bad stuff. In that first phase, you're gathering as much data from different points of views and different sources as possible. In this step, we're going to analyze and evaluate the data. Are the sources reliable? Are the conclusions data backed? Or are they just argumentative? Is there enough information or data to support any given hypothesis, whether that's yours or the question being asked or their own argument, right? Is it a good, legitimate argument? I found a lot of people, right, will make a very passionate argument, but they have no facts behind it. They have nothing to support that argument. They're arguing solely based on an emotional response. And you get a lot of that in the internet, right? Whether it's on Facebook or on a blog or on even news stations anymore. You get a lot of commentary. You get a lot of, I forgot what the official title is for it, but you get a lot of opinion pieces, right? Even in the media these days, even in the news stations. So you have to look at all that data and break it down and evaluate. Is it quality data? Are they just making arguments based on their own emotional state, or are they actually solid arguments, right? Are they answering the whys of what their argument states? Where are we? We're not number 4, okay? Identify assumptions and bias. Are you sure the sources you found are unbiased? Are you sure you weren't biased in your search for those answers? That's what I was talking about with the sounding board, or our sounding board, an echo chamber, right? Are you only looking in places where you're going to find something that supports what you think? If they were biased, do you know which bias they have? Are you letting your bias influence your search or influence the way you look at the data? This is where that scientific method, and this is why they teach in science, comes into play, right? You have to take your personal bias out of it. It's why I started listening to one of my favorite news commentators, is because I had to take my bias out of it and listen to someone else's thoughts and opinions for me to actually be able to make well-formulated thoughts and ideas of my own. Number 5, guys, determine the relevance. What piece of information is most important? Is the sample size sufficient? Are all the opinions and arguments even relevant to the problem you're trying to solve? What piece of information is most important? Is the sample? I double clicked and like totally copied that twice. Sorry, guys. I blew my PowerPoint skills. I'm so sorry. I blew it. My bad. I copied stuff twice. I took this all off my notes, so sorry about that. But, right, this is actually an argument I had not long ago with one of my guests. She sent me an article, a recent study, to back her point when we were talking on the podcast. And the information she sent me was an aggregate study of 250 participants in different studies. It wasn't an aggregate sampling of 10,000 people in the same study or in similar studies. No, it was only 250 people from all several different studies combined in an aggregate. It's like, that's a horrible sample size. That's not a really credible study at that point. Credible studies affect thousands of people over long periods of time. And so, I was like, look, I appreciate you sending me this information, but I can't agree with you because it's just not, this is not a relevant or credible study to base your thesis on or your hypothesis on. Now, guys, if you're getting anything out of this, do me a favor, whatever platform you're on, help me out. YouTube thinks I'm a loser, so hit that like button, tell people you love this, share it out, let people know that you enjoyed this or you got something out of that. That really helps me out to hit that little like button. Maybe I'll put in a little, let me know in the comments. Should I put in a little video thing? I hate that part of social media. I really do, guys. It's the worst part of this entire job. So let's get into number 6. Now, inference is a really great term that you don't hear very often. And it's identify the various conclusions that are possible to decide, which, if any of them are sufficiently supported, weigh the strengths and limitations of the possibilities. So after you've done all this research, right? After you've really weighed through it, break it down to the possible conclusions. And you're probably going to come up with more than one. Hey, Common Man's joining us on. I see my friend Alan on. Alan, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us tonight. Weigh all of it and come up with probably multiple conclusions, guys. Now, this is where I'm going to break ranks with the standard steps of critical thinking as they're broadly accepted. This is where the standardly accepted critical thinking steps stop, because you weigh the conclusions, the various conclusions, and then you pick the conclusion that you agree with most. I think that's a crap solution. Okay, so the basic steps are identification, research, evaluate, identify bias and assumptions, relevance, and inference. I want to add two more. So let me put this out there for you guys to consider. See if the argument is valid. See if I'm actually have a valid point here. I want to add a seventh step that says inject logic and reason. Now, I know this is a big ask in 2022. But I want you to weigh each of the possible conclusions that you got in inference and the data you have amassed, but I want you to weigh them with logic and reason. I said at the beginning of the show that your brain is one of the most amazing, magnificent things ever created. You have the ability to weigh in there. So make sure you answer all the question words, right? That's where I start with logic and reason. If I can't answer all the question words, right? And we all know those, right? The what, who, when, how, why. Everybody knows why is my favorite question in the world. Make sure you answer the questions, but you can't stop at just right? Those questions are multifaceted. That's not the right word. Someone tell me I said that wrong. I probably did. Right? When you start to ask the question about the conclusions, ask not only how this affects me, but how this affects other people, how this affects the person connected with it, right? If there's other people involved, who stands to make money? Who stands to benefit from the decision or me deciding this conclusion, right? Am I the one benefiting from it, or does someone else benefit from the information they presented to me that I decided? You actually have to weigh all of the questions, guys, as you're thinking critically through all the information that's being presented to you. You have to ask a lot of questions. It's really, really important, because unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of people are out for themselves. Most people are out for themselves. And so you have to ask, who stands to gain? Why would they want me to do this? Why would they make this argument? Why would they think I should do this, right? When would this affect my life? Would it not? When is this beneficial for me? When is it not beneficial? You have to ask all the questions and inject your own logic and reason, because your brain has it. You have that little voice in the back of your head going, wait, time out now. Let's walk through this. Now, I'm getting wrapped up here. Let me hit the comment section real quick. Dave says, when you have eliminated the obvious, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. That's possible, right? We have to weigh that, but ask a lot of questions along there. So it's not a bad principle to start with, right? Analytical thinking is another term for critical thinking. You are correct. That is absolutely an overlap in the two. We get lost in terminology a lot of times. I was actually on my friend Oliver's live stream just yesterday, talking to him and his wife, and I had to press him. Was like, man, that's semantics. That's all that breaks down to is it's a semantical debate. Discussing things passionately versus arguing is just a matter of semantics sometimes for some couples. And guys, if you haven't seen Oliver and Denise's shows, they do a lot of live streams. You guys have all met Oliver right here on this show and on my podcast. Oliver and Denise are amazing. And if you are looking for a relationship resource, they are incredible. They do a lot of live streams on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere you want to be. And I always enjoy them. Alan says, so very true with this. And I think that comment came in right about the time we're talking about logic and reason, guys. You have to apply it. It is so missed these days. Now, as you're injecting logic and reason into what you have inferred from all your research and data and all the things you weighed in on, guys, then and only then can we get to decision time. And I added that graphic just because I really liked that graphic I found. I hope you guys like it. But I really wanted to make a point. Then, after we weighed all this, after we've gone through this process, this is where we finally start to make a decision. And you're not going to be right 100% of the guys. Any more coffee, obviously. Just a sec. Brain booster. You're not going to be correct 1,000% of the time, okay? You're going to make mistakes. But with all the information that is being presented to you in this day and age, critical thinking is more important than ever in history, guys. It is just incredible. Now, let me wrap this up for us. And guys, if you have questions for the Q&A, if you have something you want to ask that applies to man, husband, father, anything that the Fallible Man stands for, be sure to throw that QQ in front of your comment or fill out the form and let us know that you want to come on live and discuss your thoughts on things, because I love to talk to you guys. But as we land this plane, why should you care about critical thinking? Why is Brent raving about this tonight, and why are you listening to it? Let me answer that question with a couple questions. What's your goal in life? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to become as you grow through life? Who do you want to become? I promise, find me a question that is worth answering, where the critical thinking process is not an asset that adds value, and I'll be glad to show you where you're just not understanding how to apply it, because you won't find it. If there is a question worth asking, if there's a question worth answering in your life, critical thinking as a process will help you. I promise. I think it is so important. I think it's important to teach children. I think it's something that's not being pressed in schools enough. And I think it's something that's not encouraged among adults. We're taught to take the answer we're given. All of you know that I'm a huge why person. I am such a why person. I've actually probably done multiple videos on why. It is one of the most important questions you ask. But if you apply critical thinking, it will help you in all facets of your life. There are so many applications where this will benefit you. Alan sharing with us, because you have to be thinking about how this will affect you, not just yourself, but others around you as well. That is absolutely true, Alan. We do not live in an isolation chamber. We don't live in a world cut off from other people. Every decision you make, good or bad, has an impact. It has ripples around you to the people involved in your life, your friends, your family, your coworkers, the people you cross at the grocery store. My daughters actually know the names of several of the employees at our local grocery store because they see them so often. They are people that we interact with. I've had the people in the bakery ask me about my daughters because I didn't bring them in with me to pick up donuts on the mornings we get donuts sometimes. I was like, oh no, they already started schooling for the day, so they couldn't come in. Right? You don't know sometimes the implications of your decisions to the world around you, but it is absolutely important. And critical thinking will help you now more than ever as we sort through more and more and more information, guys. And it's not going away. It's not going to lessen. There's not going to be less information. There's not going to be less sources of information. The world is going to keep throwing information at you all the time, faster and faster and faster. And it is absolutely critical. Can I say critical about critical thinking? It is absolutely imperative that you practice your critical thinking skills, because the more often you do it, the better you get at it, the faster you get at it, and it will help you with all of your decision making going forward, and it'll help you find and sort through all the crap and know what decisions and what information has value for you and you should act on. Now, guys, I'm just feeling it tonight. What do we think? Are we doing a drawing tonight? I don't see any questions. So while we're considering questions, shame on me. While we're considering questions and seeing if anybody has a question for me, what do we think we should give away tonight? What are we giving away tonight? What do you guys think? Sarah, are we giving away stickers tonight? Are we giving away a book? I have a lovely book. Who wants a book? Does anybody want a book? I like books. Let's say we'll give away a copy of my friend Nate's book, The Standing Meditation. Now, if you've already received this book, you can still roll on this book and you can just give it to somebody else you love if you enjoyed the book. But, shame on me for not letting my daughters go to the store. They do have to go to school sometimes, Alan, every now and then. So what do you think? The Standing Meditation. Who wants a copy of The Standing Meditation? I know some of you have won it in the past. My friend Nate was good enough to send that out for me and give me some extra copies to give away. Let's see. There we go. Bam. Nate Rifkin, The Standing Meditation. If you aren't familiar with Nate, you can go back in the Fallible Man podcast, and I did a great interview with Nate about his book, and it was incredible, guys. And I'm thinking I'm giving away the book tonight. So if you want a book, if you would like to read this lovely book, it's a great read, guys. I read a lot of books for my podcast. I think reading 4 or 5 right now. I read a lot of books for my podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. Otherwise, I wouldn't give away copies of it. So who wants a book? Hashtag book in the comments. That's how we play this game, and that's how you win. And based on the past, you actually have a pretty good chance of winning. So if anybody wants a book, hashtag book. I might throw a pin in with it. We never know. My wife thinks I should give away a book or a pin, so I'll probably throw one of those in there too. Hashtag book if anybody wants it. If nobody wants it, we'll just call it a night. But I love giving away things. So hashtag book. We'll give you guys a chance. Alan says the store is a very good place to learn about food balance and budget. You are absolutely correct, Alan. The girls go to the store with me a lot. We were there today. There are just days that they have to start school so they can get their schoolwork done before, so they can't always go with me in the mornings, but they go to the store with me a lot. In fact, probably more than they should sometimes. I don't see anybody rolling on hashtag book. My goodness. No books tonight, huh? All right. However you guys want it. I don't see any questions. Let me double check here. Nothing's come in. Nobody's jumping on tonight. And I'm not seeing any hashtag books, and I'm not seeing any questions in the comments. So that's cool. Guys, as always, I appreciate your time and you taking the time to hang out with us and be on the show. I love you guys. Have an amazing week this week. And until we see you guys next week, be better tomorrow because of what you do today, and we'll see you on the next one.